The best practices are evolving, but the tricks that I'm learning as an oncologist are to, if there is urgency, make sure the proceduralist knows that, make sure that the surgeon or interventional radiologist knows I need that done quickly. Sometimes the patient won't realize the urgency, and so they'll be scheduled in 2 weeks, and you'll be like, what? No, it needs to be tomorrow. And so, there needs to be communication if you have time urgency to get that first part happening. Communicating to the pathologist. You order the biopsy, and at the same time, send a note to your thoracic pathologist saying, I'm getting this, I'm getting it for resistance testing. Please, as soon as you get the specimen, cut the slides and send it to the molecular, right? And just please move us into molecular testing because that's what's so important. And don't spend too much time on IHCs and diagnosis. And so, you can do this. It takes a little extra time. And this is why biopsies are frustrating, but worth it. I do think the last final piece you can do is recommend an FNA and a cytology specimen with each core biopsy, because that can be an extra specimen that can be tested very quickly without needing to wait for the block being made and the cutting and the extra handling an FFP specimen. Maybe you can comment more on how you guys do that.
Sure, yeah. So, the cytology specimens also have the benefit of when the actual biopsy is taken, there's a cytopathologist that is immediately there at the, in the IR suite or wherever, that looks at the slide and says, yes, this will be okay for molecular testing. So the adequacy is obtained immediately instead of, it's the core biopsy gets embedded in histology and it's cut, and 3 days later a pathologist looks at it and says, oh, there's 10 tumor cells, we can't do anything with this. So that has really improved kind of turnaround times, and the turnaround time of the whole process is kind of too long anyways, and then when you kind of get to the end and you don't have enough DNA or you don't have material, you have to start all over, that's even kind of more of a devastating setback as far as getting the results for that patient. So kind of getting everyone on the same page and getting the orders put in as immediately as possible. And then from the laboratory and pathology processing side, if something is going to be tested for molecular, I know at your institution they've done the same thing. When a paraffin block is cut and the slides are made for the pathologist to look under the microscope, every time you kind of cut into a tissue specimen, there's a waste that goes on in the material that you lose. So, because you have to get it even, and so every time you cut into the block, you lose some. So cutting the slides that you need for molecular testing up front, the same time you cut the original slides, that has shown to dramatically increase the adequacy of specimens and really kind of improve outcomes from all these small biopsies that we get. So kind of working at each step of the way to work on efficiencies in the histology lab, getting the material, or working with our cytopathologist and the interventional radiologist to get those specimens. Cytosmears work great. We get amazing amounts of DNA from them. They're our best specimens that we test. They work really nicely. And then kind of after that in the lab, there's some technical limitations as kind of reducing that turnaround time. Library prep takes a certain amount of time. We try to make it as short as possible. So there's some things where we can't totally squeeze shorter, but we try to think of ways kind of at each step of the way of increasing the efficiency. And then kind of very interpretation reporting, that takes a lot of time too if it's a very large NGS panel. So at each step of the way, I think it's important to sit and think, how can we kind of improve this, increase the efficiency, and try to decrease the turnaround time, as much as possible.
The cytology point's really important, right? When an assay is developed for regulatory purposes, it's really usually done on a surge path core specimen, okay? And that's a regulatory phenomenon, that surge path is different than cytology. But in the real world, cytology specimens are fine. And so what's happened is we've moved so far into surge path specimens that the cytologists are being left out, and they're increasingly recognizing, look, we have great specimens, use them. And so, it's been very fun to increasingly, milk rewards out of these smaller cytology specimens that actually are rich with material. We've actually done a recent research paper. This is investigational, but after the cytology specimen is spun into a block, the supernatant that we throw out for all of these is rich with DNA. You can actually do a liquid biopsy on the DNA in the supernatant, and there's so much specimen in here. And if you're really ambitious about hanging on to it, there are a lot of answers that you can get from all of that.